Welcome to The Prize Inside. A chiropractor's journey in everyday holistic health and vitality. Here, your host, Dr. Jeremy Myers, delves into the remarkable journeys of everyday people who have embraced the path to health and healing. Through his practice, Dr. Jeremy encounters inspiring stories of profound transformation and the power of true healing within each of us. Stay tuned as we discuss various holistic topics and unlock the healing potential that lies within us all.
Join us as we explore the prize inside, looking at holistic health and extraordinary human potential.
Hi there.
Hi there.
The Prize Inside, a podcast dedicated to holistic living and unlocking your human potential.
All right, welcome everybody. Hopefully everybody's doing well tonight. Good evening. Hopefully tonight will be an interesting one. I remember this word after doing this. You start thinking of like, what can we talk about? And to be honest with you, there's so much in the human body. I can find all kinds of things. So I always thought this would be a really cool time frame to understand what this word is. Okay. So the word is hysteresis. Hysteresis is a ligament muscle tendon phenomenon. It's also a lot of other things. So it's a lot of engineering. It's a physics situation where we'll talk about it. A lot of my engineers out there will understand the hysteresis with systems. Let's say systems, when you're trying to get everything to work right, there's a history to the process as it moves, as a system starts to age. Okay. So what we're going to do tonight is talk about that stuff. So in the ligament and orthopedic realm, because not a lot of people talk about this. And once we go through it, it's one of the things that just makes me so excited about like chiropractic in general, because of the ability of chiropractic to aid in improvement of this thing that we call hysteresis. Okay. So before we get started, remember to subscribe to our newsletter at tribe1.substack.com. tribe1.substack.com. We have a little Tuesday newsletter that we do. And that's where you can get notifications for when we go live. If you like the videos, Rumble at the Prize Inside a Chiropractor's Journey. YouTube is the Prize Inside a Chiropractor's Journey, and hopefully always we'll keep on the Facebook Lives and those things. But Rumble and YouTube are places you can go to watch the backstory of the things, right? So that is good. And the newsletter places where if you want to go back and there's something in there as far as information goes. Especially like when I think of different herbs that we talk about, like how to take them, what they're good for. A lot of times I'll convert those our lives into a newsletter, and then that way you guys could use it and have some kind of paper copy versus having to listen to the whole thing or that kind of thing. So remember those. I keep moving up in the world of subscribers. I'm so pumped. I'm stuck on Rumble at 75 subscribers. YouTube, I'm getting 1 or 2, but I'm not doing it. I do it organically. So I hope my information is good enough to where, we will be able to do that. The one that always shocks me though is my podcast. So the podcast always in the audio form, and you can get that on Spotify, Apple, whatever. That one actually does the best. It does a ton of downloads, all those kind of things. So I'm excited. I'm excited also to tell you that I have 2 so far, 2, and then 2 interviews that we're going to do. They're both going to be on Wednesday night, that show. But I cannot wait till you guys hear who I got. I talk about them all the time, and whoa, so that's pretty cool. I keep working on that because that's really one of my passions as well, is to find like-minded people. Like my brother Ryan's been on. If you've gone back into our old podcast, I have several good interviews. And I'm going to get more of those as we go. I just wanted to get that consistency going where I know I always have a show. And then if something happens where I don't have an interviewee, I still have, content. So that's one reason I've kind of hold off on the interview thing, because, I want to be more consistent. And so Sunday and Wednesday night were the thing. Okay. So let's talk about this crazy idea of hysteresis. Okay. You're going to learn some cool stuff. This is and this is super valuable. Hysteresis, very important to understand if you have any ligaments or tendons or you're any kind of athlete. So there you go. Or anything else. Okay. The hidden, let me get rid of that banner thing. Okay. The hidden memory in your ligaments. Why hysteresis? Think history. Okay. So I'm trying to remember, get you to think that way. Like why hysteresis keeps you moving smarter and safer. Okay. So what are we going to go over tonight? It's what is the concept of hysteresis? It's think of physics. We're going to go through some of that. How can we use this principle to our advantage, which is the big thing? How can we use this knowledge in our daily lives, which is another huge one that we're going to talk about? What we can do at home, and what are some things to improve what we're going to talk about tonight, which is the physical principle of hysteresis and ligaments. Okay. So what is hysteresis? Let's talk about it. The core idea in simple terms. We'll see if this is simple compared to what we got going. Okay. The output or state of a system does not depend only on the current input. It also depends on the history of previous inputs. The system remembers where it came from, and it takes different paths going up and going down. Okay. This is the physics principle. This creates characteristic loop-shaped graphs that's famous for hysteresis. Okay, so let's go through a concept so you guys can kind of in your brain understand this. And I have tonight samples of stuff. Okay, so what we're going to talk about in the ligament situation, ligament, tendon, muscle. Okay, hysteresis is when you have an input. So right now in my hand for my podcast, I have, it's going to be really sweet. I have a grocery bag. Okay. So a plastic grocery bag you get from the grocery store. Okay. What we're going to do is I'm going to stretch it with two inputs pulling from, actually I'm going to take one input. I'm going to pull from a fixed point. Okay. So as this ligament gets pulled and stretched, it starts to stretch the bag. Okay. Now, here's the thing. Hysteresis is the history of the stretching. Okay. So now I'm going to take that same bag, right? And I'm going to take the same amount of pressure, but now I have a history of where it was stretched. Is the bag going to feel the same? No. You can start feeling it stretch out. It's starting to get a little weaker as we go. Okay. And so as I keep doing that, now I'm doing another one. So the history of this area of this bag is getting that same force, that same input is causing the bag to get longer and longer. So think of that when you're talking about in your brain, the history of a ligament stretching. Okay. So that's where it gets super important. And I got some other materials, but I wanted to explain what they're talking about is once the input is in there once, okay, the next time there's another history to the input, let's say I'll use another good example I like. A baby doesn't know how to walk. but then they learn how to. The input on the ligaments of their body are going to be different, right? Because now they know how to walk. And then the next time they go to walk, the history is a little different because they learned how to walk on the initial one. Okay. So that's basically like the hysteresis concept. Hopefully I don't lose you guys on this because it blows your mind so much on how important this stuff is, especially this. When you have a history of input that goes into these ligaments or tendon, it's going to have a different output, or there's a different path that'll end up. Okay. So that tells you a little bit. Okay. So in a mechanical system, there's force, right? Like I said, we're pulling on that bag. There's causes a deformation, right? So we're causing a change into the material, which is, in this case, it's a grocery bag, which causes this deformation, which then causes that same force placed on it to have a different result. Okay. So it's called so all in the mechanical engineering world, you see this with rubber, plastics, soils, and then of course muscles and tendon. Okay. So a good analogy that they used in this example was a thermostat. So a thermostat, once it's put in, let's say you set it at 65 degrees for cooling, and then you want it to be higher or like lower than 65. Okay, so your AC keeps you at 65 degrees all summer, and in the wintertime you keep it at 70. Let's say 70. So 70, it heats to make sure that you don't drop below the 70. What happens in the system of the HVAC situation is that the system starts building in, based on what the temperature is outside. So, and now you have these smart systems that'll do this. So let's say it's -10 outside. Your system in your mechanical HVAC system will start ramping up the force, or the engine of the fire and the blowing of your furnace, because it's -10, because it's been turned on and off several times. It has a feel for it. So like if it's 30 out, it doesn't have to work as hard, right? So it doesn't blow as much. So that's kind of where the hysteresis of mechanical parts go. They get used to. That's why once a furnace starts going, let's say it's a super cold year, that furnace just kicks on. And a lot of times you won't have a lot of problems because it's got this history to it, right? The moment you turn it on that first time, though, gives a history of like, let's see what happens, right? That first initial cold or whatever, right? So hopefully this is making sense. So that's a good way to think about it as far as this history. There's a history to the load. And hopefully you're understanding that, the history to the load. So let's talk about this in muscles and tendons. How about runners? How about people that sit in a chair for a really long period of time during the day? What's the history of the load? The history is the ligaments know sit it. Let's use a chair for an example. Let's say you got a desk job that you're there 8 hours and all you can do is sit. The hysteresis, there's a load on those ligaments. Those ligaments start to deform because there's an input to them. And then once they deform, they have a history now. So now they're going to deform more. Very similar to my grocery bag. Okay. So if I'm sitting all day and I have this force, this sitting force, it's going to create, some deformation in that ligament. And then I come back the next day, let's say I walked all night, and then I sit again, we're starting to create more deformation, but in the same part, there's a history to it. So that's where we start getting some ligament damage from things that you wouldn't necessarily think about. Okay. So it's a loop that it's like energy gets lost because of the deformation. So if in a perfect thing, think of, okay, so this one, Let's say in a perfect hysteresis, you would have an input in. So you'd have an input just like a rubber band. So let's talk about a rubber band. So a rubber band, a perfect rubber band would have, even though it still has a little history, it has a lot more elasticity. So what happens is like that. So you go from here, and then that elasticity allows that rubber band to come back to almost its original spot without a lot of deformation. Okay. When you have that, where that deformation is not as much, then your hysteresis wouldn't be too bad. You wouldn't lose it to deformation. The history on the rubber band isn't too bad. Now, the problem, and rubber bands have really good hysteresis, right? The problem is our ligaments aren't rubber bands. And that's unfortunate because that would be a lot easier. They're really more like the grocery bags I was showing you. Okay. Now we'll talk about some differences in that scenario as we go. All right. So just remember that there's heat that's lost. There's deformation that can happen. Okay. So hysteresis in the body. Let's talk about this. Ligaments and muscles are technically where they usually talk about hysteresis. Hysteresis is a broad concept that shows up in all these fields: magnetism, electronics, material sciences. But in biology and orthopedic sports medicine, it specifically describes how ligaments and tendons behave under loading and unloading forces. This is probably one of the biggest concepts and the biggest misnomers in all of science because no one ever pays attention to it. And if you're a joint guy, like a chiropractor is, where we're very specific on understanding how the joint complex works and operates, this ligament tendon hysteresis is a big, big deal, but in our medical sick care model right now, we don't necessarily take care of this properly, but sometimes we do. Okay. What does it mean for ligaments? Ligaments are what they call viscoelastic tissues. They have both elastic, like spring-like properties. So it has some, and viscous, which is dampening properties due to collagen fibers. Think of the bag. So think of more the grocery bag. Okay. So because of the collagen doesn't have as much elasticity as other things. When you apply force, stretch a ligament during movement, the loading phase, the stretch force increasing, the force elongation or stress strain curve goes one way. When you unload off of that ligament, okay, the curve does not follow the exact same path. Okay. So it stays higher or shifted. Okay. So that's what I was explaining with the grocery bag. That's why when we start getting into this physics stuff, go back to the grocery bag. If I have a load, I'm stretching the grocery bag, but I'm going to stretch it in the exact same place the next time. What happens to the material? The material, the ligament, is going to have some give to it. Okay. So that is essentially hysteresis. The area inside the loop represents energy dissipated. So once you have, let's say, ligament injury, okay, so that's a severe force, right? A severe force that pulls that bag even harder, right? What constitutes the hysteresis or the movement or the force? You will have heat that dissipates. Now, the harder and the more damage that occurs in some kind of major force like that, the more hysteresis you're going to have a problem with. Okay, let me explain this. So if I was playing a soccer game and I twisted my ankle or my knee to the point of taking out one of the ligaments of the knee, okay, well, and I'm going so hard and so that force is just violent, right? So I strain that ligament. As I'm pulling this grocery bag apart, it's a lot more force there. But the problem is, remember, if I do that, look at the force and what happens to the deformation of the ligament. It's significant. So how does your body want to heal that? It throws inflammatory cells into the area to make it swollen so that you can go back and like it'll start to re-heal where that deformation happened. Okay. It's pretty interesting how that works, right? We want to make sure we have that. Now, the next time, let's say you heal up, you ice it, and then you go out and you hurt the same spot. Now we got even more deformation that occurred in that area. You can see how this can add up and be a major, major problem. Okay. So ligaments. So here's another one. Ligaments don't return all the energy they stored. They lose some. This is why repeated loading, like running or jumping, generates heat in your joints, and why tissues can protect against sudden shocks, but also fatigue over time, which is exactly what we're going to talk about tonight. Hopefully, this will make a lot of sense to you guys. So, big key points of ligament and hysteresis. The typical values in human tendon ligaments, hysteresis is often 10 to 30% energy loss per cycle. So every time, this is reported in Achilles tendon studies, okay, at lower after preconditioning cycles, but we'll talk about that. Why it matters for force on ligaments. It reduced bound efficiency, less spring back compared to pure elastic materials like steel spring. It provides shock absorption and dampening, helps prevent injuries by dissipating sudden forces. Repeated cycles, tissue preconditioned, right? So if I keep doing the same thing over and over and over again, hysteresis, because it has this history to that joint, it starts to slightly get worse and worse and is not able to stabilize as well. Too much hysteresis, energy lost over time, leads to fatigue, overuse injuries, and altered joint stability. Man, this is a big topic. So I know it's a little more boring than, milk thistle. Speaking of that, I'm doing, what am I doing tonight? Linden. It's a combination. It looked really good. So it was a combination of one that I got at our local grocery store, which is great. So I'll have to look. It was a very good one, though. So research shows that hysteresis can improve efficiency with certain stimuli. Okay. So now that we know what hysteresis is, which is load of a ligament over time, it starts causing a problem. Okay. So I do the same running pattern, but let's say I don't know how to run. Okay. So I've never knew how to run and I run on my heels. Okay. So I run on my heels and my body gets used to that and I'm able to run. Eventually, the heels, the joints, all of those things start to take a toll because you have this ligament and I keep running every single day. Okay. Those ligaments are taking a toll. And that is one of the things that you got to understand. The other way to think about it is I sit at a desk all day. There's a force of the gravity when your body is in sitting position. And that body, by staying in that same spot, allows hysteresis, a force, your bent posture to flex those ligaments start to get longer, right? Because there's force applied to the ligaments. And the more you do it, the worse that situation gets. I always think of one of the worst ones that I see in the summer, especially, is people that sit on a riding lawnmower. Because the problem with a riding lawnmower is the vibrational nail you, because ligaments, that's another force that's going into those ligaments and discs and everything else. But what happens is like you might be on that like 3 to 4 hours and your vibration plus sitting. So that's a lot. So I always tell people, challenge yourself to see how comfortable this is. When we sit, we're pretty comfortable because our legs are bent and all those kind of things. But if I bend at the waist and touch my toes and I just kept you there, you wouldn't be as comfortable. You would feel the tightness start building up in your low back. But the problem is you don't notice that that's happening when we're sitting. Okay. And that's one of the big things that we have to watch, because our body likes to hump. We would like to stress out all those ligaments. The more we humped over, the more we have ligaments that are doing that. But then you do it over time. Hysteresis shows us the first time you're humped over, then the next day it's the same, right? So that's what tonight is about. We're going to focus in on ideas and exercises and things you can do to improve your hysteresis, your ligament memory, which is crazy that there is actual stuff you can do. Okay. Because no one thinks you can, and it absolutely can be done. Okay. So this one is cool. So this is where we're going to increase our hysteresis. So what we're going to do is take ligaments that have been through some crap. Okay. So like my grocery bag here where I pushed it. Now we got these ligaments now this grocery bag's pretty thin. Okay. Here is where this is so mind blowing. Can I do anything to really repair and make this not as thin of a bag now that I put this force on there? When you put too much stuff in a grocery bag, and that thing's the handle's about to pop off because you put way too much in there. Do you sit and can you put that thing together? Not really. You know what can do it? The human body, the innate intelligence of the human body. That's pretty dang cool, man. So that's where my mind was blown. Ligament damage doesn't mean it's the end all be all. In fact, I've seen it in real time. When somebody tells you your knee is bone on bone, your hip is bone on bone, your neck, there's nothing, it's all bone on bone, right? You hear this, shoulder, it's over, right? All these different things. I've seen every single one of those joints improve with a lot of movement patterns that are off the normal beaten path, right? We're not going to do the same thing over and over again. We're going to change it. We're going to change the dynamic of that energy. That, my friends, is where the secret sauce is. And that's why I love chiropractic so much. So here is some that we can do. So research shows that hysteresis can decrease. We can actually improve it with certain little stimuli. While related properties like stiffness often increase for better resilience, the key modes are isometric holds. Okay, so we'll talk about this. This is static contractions, often the safest starter, especially for beginners, injury recovery, or older adults. They promote tendon adaptation with low risk and can stimulate collagen production. Isometric holds, think of what they call planks or wall sits, things that you're not moving, but you're really ticking off those muscles, right? So a plank is just a push-up, but you just hold it. You hold it as long as you can. I liked calling isometrics, like me and my one patient were talking about. He does dead man's hangs. We've talked about it at length. Dead man's hangs really, really can do a good job, in helping your core, your hand strength, plus everything else. But isometrics are where you're not contracting the muscle. You're just holding it and like flexing. So I think of like when a bodybuilder's trying to flex a little bit, that'd be kind of like an isometric. Okay. So think planks, think seated wall sits, where you just sit against the wall until your legs can't do it anymore. Hopefully that makes sense. So isometrics, though, help ligament strength and tendon strength as well. And that's why I want you to hear those isometrics. So many athletes, we don't do these kind of things. It's kind of driving me nuts, because we're down these rabbit holes of like more, where if I could improve your ligament health, I think I can make you the best athlete out there, and there is a lot you can do. And we'll go through a story, just exactly what I saw in my life. So eccentric focus loading. So we'll talk about this. This is slow lowering control phase. Okay. So this builds resilience and targets tendon remodeling. So this is what they call in weightlifting negatives. So negatives are where you're holding a weight. Let's say you're bench pressing. And so as you're holding this weight, it's actually getting heavier and heavier and heavier, and you're trying to hold it, right? Trying to hold it, and you can't. This is when you want to have a helper with this as well, because of that motion. These are huge, and it doesn't take that long. You could weightlift the rest of the day and put in an isometric move and a negative move, or what they call it eccentric move, right? So I probably wouldn't do it with squats. That's a little bit, usually benches the place, or shoulder presses where you're holding them up as long as you can, allowing them to just fail on its own, and you can't move it up any further. Oh, it's so glorious. And that's a big deal. That's a very big deal. Like these little tiny movement patterns can really, really, help. I want to thank you guys for making me get on these consistent things. My workouts have been fantastic. I haven't been able to work out because my barn was too cold. So I kind of gave it a break, gave it some rest, and I got back into it. Man, the stuff that we've gone over in these little postural moves, and it's all because I'd probably not pay attention to as much. I just do my own little thing. But like in this really, really does add some stuff. Ryan, my brother, talks about it all the time. He just adds a few new things in there, and sees how he really, really feels. It's all about how you feel, right? And so that's the fantastic part. Okay, so that was eccentric. So that was called negatives, if you ever think about that. So you're holding a weight with a partner, and you're allowing that weight to kind of come down, and then you start over and you try to hold it away from you. Okay. So plyometrics is explosive, huge area, like jumps, quick bounces. This helps massively help ligament improve our hysteresis during fast movements, enhancing elastic recoil, improve stretch shortening cycle efficiency for athletic performance. So what I see most of the time in most athletic situations is we want to work on the thing that we're athletic in. Okay. So here, a good example that I can use probably right now. Let's say you're a wrestler and all you do is practice the same wrestling moves over and over. What happens is over time, you're causing your own deformation. And so you can actually see this in like Olympic wrestlers or anybody. They have a certain shape to them. I don't mean to pick on wrestlers. Let's how about, because every athlete has the same thing. You could, how about a distance runner in the Olympics? They have a certain shape to them, right? And one of the reasons is because of this deformation that happens in the ligaments. Okay. Their body is actually changing. But one way to keep that performance level higher than normal, is to kind of challenge that deformation in different ways. So if I was a wrestler, I would do a lot of explosive things. I would do a lot of explosive jumps. I would be jump roping. Why boxers did that? There's a reason, right? Little jump rope action, little box jumps, those kind of things. Little swimming, but not just swimming, like sprint swimming, right? So that's the big thing. So you want to do things that kind of create this explosiveness. The explosiveness help bring that hysteresis energy back into those ligaments. And the negatives are good. I like isometrics, all of those things. Okay, so static stretching, okay, sometimes can lower hysteresis by altering viscosity, though it's secondary to load-based training. Okay, so a lot of stretching is not really for that. Okay, so it does have some evidence that it will help a little bit. And I recommend it all the time, like yoga style postures, but maybe not holding them. Okay, so if we're working on hysteresis, yoga in a long sustained yoga might not be your answer. right? Where you're holding positions for a lot longer. However, fast yoga, where you're holding positions for small little chunks of that time, could be very, very good. In fact, like a lot of stretching could be good, right? As long as everything's balanced and through. The biggest thing, though, is a lot of times it's like on a low level. But here's the crazy part. I just gave you 3 things that are like scientifically better doing static plyos, so like a plank, the eccentric, which is the negative where you're doing that, and explosive movements. Those 3 beat stretching all day, right? But the nice thing about stretching is it does improve the length of those ligaments and all those kind of things, so that's nice. But if we're looking for hysteresis, which is to me the energy within the ligament, okay, it's giving you life, it's giving you youthfulness in that ligament, I want to pick the other stuff. Okay, all right, heavy slow resistance, I like this one too. Combine concentric and eccentric movements, increase stiffness and overall tendon health. Okay, I learned this a long time ago in my weightlifting world. This is one where you get a spotter, and you almost have a amount of weight that's on that bench, let's say, that's too much for you, or just enough where it's just you're barely going to get like 2 or 3. Okay, so what you want to do is you want to get that first pump up there. For me, it's like 600-700 pounds. No, I'm just kidding. So as we pump up, it's really difficult. So you'd have your spotter, right? And then as you're coming down, the idea is you have to do the negative part. So you're trying to not let it come down. And then you fire back up and you make this big, powerful, explosive movement. So it's kind of you do the concentric and eccentric, which is do the positive and the negative in one big move. That's another one that can really help with hysteresis. Okay. So these are all different movement patterns that you can do on your own in your own exercise. Now, who would somebody be that would want to do something like this? Maybe somebody that's had a shoulder injury, back injury, knee injury, hip injury, neck injury. Pick one. Any musculoskeletal injury, and you're going back into working out. Why wouldn't you want to improve the energy of your ligaments? That's what this whole talk is tonight. I'll stop talking about hysteresis. It's energy, putting it back into your ligaments. And how do you do that? Through dedicated movement patterns. Now, I'm going to show you a couple other things that we can do as well. All right. So here are some herbs that actually help with this. This is kind of interesting that there are, because of the ligament healing capabilities of the ones I'm going to show you, they can be fantastic. Okay. So turmeric makes number 1 on the list because of its anti-inflammatory properties. And when you have strong curcumin in it, it has the most tendon benefits. So that's pretty awesome. Boswellia, I spelled it wrong on here. Boswellia always comes in at a really close second as far as ligament and tendon healing, and just giving actual good energy to, ligaments and tendons in the collagen aspect. Bromelain, another great anti-inflammatory. Gotu kola is one we've talked about a few times. Great one for ligaments and tendons in the health aspect. And then one that I hadn't come across until tonight was Solomon seal. So Solomon seal is another herb. And of course, make sure we don't take this stuff without doctor approval. Come in, discuss it with me, or, get with your medical doctor to make sure you can take anything. Turmeric's pretty chill. But, sorry, that was interesting. But we want to make sure, these are things that we ramp up for this ligament stuff. I know it's kind of a boring subject. I hope, you guys enjoy this one. But it's so important. It's like blowing my mind how important this is. But what can also we do now? Here's something that we didn't think about. We can improve these ligaments by stressing them in different ways, right? So the human body is the only thing. I can't take this grocery bag and like re-stress it in certain ways and have it actually heal up, right? But the innate intelligence of the body can. That's what's so neat. You can literally change the direction of your ligaments and tendons, okay? One of the things that is so valuable about chiropractic, but not just chiropractic, regular chiropractic care that looks at your mechanics of your spine, checks out all the biomechanics of everything, and gets everything working in a certain way. That is adding hysteresis to the area. We are trying to recapture the motion in a certain spot, whether that be your foot, whether it be your low back, whether it be your neck, shoulder, whatever it is. We have to, because hysteresis is lost in that area, a chiropractic adjustment is trying to get the mechanics proper so that we can do that. Okay. So my biggest thing, if you get out of anything on this hysteresis lesson tonight, is get adjusted on a regular basis first before we start our activities, right? This is the one that really, really makes sense to me. A lot of times we talk about nervous system, and nervous system always works. But if I want a perfect joint structure, if I want my musculoskeletal system to work on a regular all the time, what I would do is get adjusted on a regular basis and possibly do this thing called gua sha. Okay. So gua sha is a technique that we offer at the office. Actually, I did it to Rachel tonight. She's not a big fan because it hurts. It's not an easy technique, but this gua sha is a certain place where if you know where the scar tissue is, or that tendon needs to be rehealed, because remember the hysteresis, sometimes the ligament will get damaged. What happens when the ligament gets damaged? The cells come in to repair it. That the reparative process is scar tissue. Okay. So it's not as good as the ligament that you started with. Okay. What you can do sometimes is that you can use a technique called gua sha, where you go actually into the tendon itself. That tendon, you bring in heat and healing and blood and everything into that area to have it kind of reheal up. By doing that, sometimes the hysteresis finds a new life, right? And so that is one reason I'm showing Rachel is one of the neatest things about gua sha in my life was the only reason we know about it at the office is I had one of my favorite patients of all time, Ann Buffinga. Ann Buffinga was 93 years old and still adjusting people. 93, and she still had chiropractic patients. Okay. With that, one of the things I got chosen to work on her. So I'd go to Ann's house because she had all the stuff. So I'd go there, and she had her gown on with her spine exposed. And then she had this little tool that she wanted me to use. And I was to do this gua sha technique on her spine. I learned so much doing that technique that it just blows my mind. The amount of kind of rehealing you can do in the ligaments themselves is phenomenal. And I think we should do it more and more. So this year, I'm putting an onus on that to make sure that if, I'm going to have times where I'm going to be able to do that stuff. So, so what do I recommend for sciatica? Sciatica is interesting. So, Connie, if you could tell me if it's like a chronic as we go. Because if we're talking ligament stuff, sciatica is very rough. We have to get into getting rid of those ligaments, first calming down the area, right? With like ice movement. Sometimes a lot of times what you can do, let's say the sciatic nerve really hurts at a certain, when you like extend your leg out, one of the ways that your body could, you start wiggling your foot a little bit, getting adjusted, obviously. But a lot of those things we want to kind of come in. Now, in a sciatic situation, I don't want to do gua sha and more pain in that area. What we have to do is get you to get that area calmed down first. Once that area gets calmed down, which is not our MO of life. So that's one of the problems, is like our life pushes us where we should be kind of laying low on that sciatic nerve stuff. And then a lot of times we get better. You know what I mean? So yes. So sciatic nerve, so many different things. Like if you're not dealing with the sciatic nerve, oh, I have so many exercises for you. Like standing, like let's say you got over it, Connie. So let's say you got over the sciatic nerve. It's not hurting anymore. Like a wall squat. That's what they're called. Wall squat against the wall could be a fantastic thing, right? Sounds nuts, but what you're doing is rehealing it in the proper direction. A plank would also be good. All of these different exercises. We don't have to like physically keep moving that joint to tick it off. We want to get it to that, that time where it actually starts strengthening. Okay. So, and then muscle, like these muscle treatments to release muscle memory. So a lot of times that's where therapy is really good. So like a physical therapy type situation, they do a pretty good job of training these muscles back and forth. What did you say, Matt? Oh, Matt works on me, but a day later, my hamstring tightens right back up. Yeah, okay. Let me show you. Okay, so the day it happens. However, the best way to say is wherever that pain is actually occurring. So is it when your leg's straight out? Is it just sitting there? So wherever that leg is hurting, let's say if you're sitting and the pain is in your leg, let's use that one. What I would do is you want to keep, especially if you're getting somewhere, if we're starting to adjust you, and then we got to get that leg moving when it's not in pain. So what happens is you want to keep moving that leg like you're a kid. So you want to like kick it back and forth in a chair. What you're doing is you're causing that nerve to go, hey, this is what I want to do. So I want to, they essentially call it flossing that nerve back and forth. Once you start working that, sometimes you're going to make a big difference there. So that is a big thing as you go through that. But a lot of times with the muscle treatment in hysteresis, you want to think of the things that we were talking about, the negatives, the all of the planks, the power lifting type stuff. Fast, explosive things help ligaments and tendons a little bit more. Okay. When you're looking at chronic movements, marathon runner, constantly up and down kind of motion, somebody that has to sit a long time every day, all the time, sitting, it acts as this hysteresis that really starts nailing you pretty good. And so what happens is that hysteresis, every time you sit, it causes a reaction to occur in there. And so that's when it starts getting bad. So that is what we can do for removing the interferences. So what are we going to do tonight for our 1% tribe? So we're going to evaluate how you exercise and make sure you add some concepts like we talked about. Get adjusted on a regular basis. If this is something, if you're battling an old injury, don't give it up until we get, keep doing the adjustment part. You're helping those ligaments out in your body. And once you get that, you can really kind of reverse a lot of those things. And then, of course, try that gua sha stuff. Ask us about it and see if it's something, that's right for that time frame. So hopefully you guys enjoyed it. I know it's a little worse at night. Okay. So what I would do, Connie, so this is a good question. Worse at night, when you're laying down flat, start wiggling that foot and then get to a point where you're like, okay, once we get that foot kind of wiggled, and then when you're on your feet, you should be like shaking that out. The biggest thing for you, hon, is I got to get you out of sitting. Like, I don't know, because your job is that way and everything else. So we got to get you off of that. And that could help the most, because it's like, it's terrible when you have to go back into that same position. And like hysteresis shows, once that ligament's there, how do you fix it? We got to change the habit that's happening. So, but yeah, that's the hardest part of tonight is hysteresis. We'll probably reintroduce this at some point in my future, because I love the topic. Hopefully it made sense. Let me know in the comments if it did. It's a little more of a complexity one, but remember the history. Ligaments have history, and that history can either be good for you or it can not, right? And our job is to rewrite that history in our ligaments. And how are you going to do that not doing anything different, right? So with that said, you guys have a great night. See you Wednesday night at 8:30 for Whole Health Weekly, where we'll get to see all the newest, latest health trends and go from there. All right, guys, take it easy.